They closed the file with a single official stamp. Closed. The folder was archived, the budget finalized, and the excavation near Luxor was formally declared complete. On paper, the work at the rocky ridge west of the Nile had ended quietly, without discoveries worthy of notice. But the field logs tell a different story. When those logs were reviewed years later, a battered leather notebook, its pages smeared with dust, sweat, and fading ink, they revealed activity that continued well beyond the official closure date. Not speculation, not memory, written entries, observations recorded after the site was supposed to be inactive. And once those entries are read in sequence, the contradiction becomes impossible to ignore. To understand why this matters, it helps to remember what excavation in this region represents. In 1922, when Howard Carter opened the tomb of Tutankhamun, he permanently altered the expectations of what the Egyptian desert could still conceal. Since then, every generation of archaeologists working near Luxor has carried the quiet awareness that the ground is not finished revealing itself. This particular project unfolded in Wadi Gabanat El Khroud, a lesser-known valley on the west bank of the Nile. It was not a glamorous operation, no monumental entrances, no carved pylons visible from the surface, just a ridge of compacted rock and sediment shaped by floods, wind, and centuries of neglect. A joint British-Egyptian team had worked there intermittently for over a decade. Their mission was modest: stabilize old tunnels, document subsurface anomalies, and verify whether earlier surface disturbances hinted at something deeper. For years, the logs were routine: coordinates, stratigraphy, sediment composition. Then, slowly, the tone began to change. Around the 11th week of the final season, measurements gave way to observations. One entry noted a subsurface pattern inconsistent with natural formation. Another mentioned a void where no void should exist. No explanation followed. 2 days later, the logs recorded the discovery of a crawl space, barely wide enough for a single person to pass through. Beyond it lay a short descent into a low chamber. Those who entered described an immediate change in the air: cooler, stiller, carrying the faint scent of ancient oils and desiccated linen. It was the kind of silence that feels occupied. The field director, Pierce Litterland, documented the moment with characteristic restraint. His entry was brief: small chamber, ceiling painted, fragments recovered. But the paperwork in the regional office tells a different story. According to administrative records, the excavation had already been classified as closed before that entry was written. What lay inside the chamber made that contradiction far more troubling. The ceiling was painted deep blue and scattered with gold stars, a funerary motif reserved for royal burials.
In ancient Egyptian belief, such a ceiling represented the night sky itself, placing the deceased beneath the cosmic order of the gods. It was a deliberate act. Someone had carried pigments underground and painted a fragment of heaven inside solid rock. Yet the chamber beneath that celestial roof was almost empty. No intact coffers, no furniture, no remains. Instead, there were absences, carefully cleared spaces, and scattered fragments, as if objects had once been present and later removed with intention. Among those fragments were shards of alabaster vessels, translucent and finely worked. Several bore partial hieratic inscriptions. The signs were incomplete, eroded by time, but a recurring sequence appeared in multiple fragments. Tutmos. The logs were careful. The team did not declare a discovery. They noted a likelihood. In Egyptological terms, the sequence strongly suggested the name Thutmose, associated with a line of New Kingdom rulers. If the attribution was correct, the implications were significant. Thutmose II ruled during a period marked by political instability and later historical erasure. His name exists in the shadow of Hatshepsut, whose reign was followed by systematic attempts to remove her memory from monuments and records. In Egypt, names were not permanent. History could be edited. The emptiness of the chamber began to resemble something archaeologists had seen before: not looting, but reburial. In times of crisis, priests relocated royal remains to protect them from tomb robbers. Entire burials were dismantled, goods redistributed, mummies hidden in caches like the famous TT-320. Such practices leave behind rooms that appear violated, but are in fact evidence of deliberate preservation. The walls of the chamber offered further clues: painted scenes from the Amduat, the journey of the sun god through the underworld, lined sections of the rock. These images were not decorative, they were instructional, ritualistic, and typically reserved for royal contexts. The chamber was not an accident, but neither was it complete. As excavation continued, the logs began to reflect something subtler.
References to time became inconsistent. Entries logged hours apart described identical conditions. Entire days passed without notation, then resumed without explanation. Then a single word appeared: containment. It was not followed by protocol, not accompanied by concern. It appeared once, and then vanished. Photographic records from that phase are missing entirely. Index numbers skipped forward as if images were never taken. And then, according to public records, the excavation ended. The final report stated that no significant findings were made, and that the site was sealed to preserve geological stability. Except the logs did not stop. For 9 days after the official closure date, entries continued. They were unsigned. The language was no longer technical. The chamber responds differently when occupied.
Sound behaves inconsistently near the southern wall. Documentation no longer matches the site. These are not archaeological measurements. They read like attempts to describe a space that had begun behaving unpredictably. The final entry contains no data at all. Only one sentence. We are no longer certain the site is inactive. After that, the logs end. No inquiry followed. No explanation was issued. No personnel changes were recorded. The site remains sealed. Satellite imagery shows no surface disturbance since the closure, no retrieval of equipment, no evidence of re-entry. Officially, nothing was left behind. Yet years later, a routine maintenance audit revealed something unexpected. Power consumption had been recorded beneath the ridge for months after the excavation was closed. There were no authorized systems connected, no monitoring equipment listed. The usage was intermittent, localized, low but measurable. The explanation given was data error. No correction was ever filed. Today, the excavation is still classified as resolved. No follow-up permits have been issued, no public reassessment approved. The chamber with its painted stars remains sealed beneath the rock. Whether the discrepancy between paperwork and logs reflects caution, oversight, or something harder to define is left unresolved. What remains is the record itself, a contradiction preserved in ink and stone. They close the excavation, but the logs say something else.